Hello, I'm Donald Cribbs, and I'm going to read a few poems from a chapbook of poems called Fish Out of Water. This is a companion piece to the novel that's coming out just 2 days after Phil's book, which is all that matters. So, um, thank you. This first poem is, oh, sorry, I skipped the part where I explain who I am. I'm an LPC, a licensed professional counselor. I focus on trauma, healing trauma survivors and helping them to walk their way out of the burning building. I'm also a poet, a writer, and an author, and I'm a survivor of sexual assault at 6. This first poem is called Strained. The hiding place beneath stairs is boarded up, flesh remembering each slash, scarred over. Immersed in a quiet field of thought, I've drawn blood back in, straining for each drop. Those frantic moments, I reeled through the empty house, a mosaic of dish shards on the kitchen floor, furniture overturned, the stair railings limp arm dangling. Upstairs, I see the bathroom door speared by a bed rail, the telephone sirens off the hook. The police station expects my call. Astounding, isn't it? The complexities we can live with. Moving again, displaced by boxes, a packing house. We leave precious things behind. Rising again, we lay our bodies down among the broken things. Tiny shards fitted firmly to the tile floor, straining for beauty. This next one is knowledge of good and evil. For God knows that when you eat of it, your eyes will be opened, and you will be like God, knowing good and evil. Genesis 3:5. I stumbled upon pornography in the outhouse, a standoff at the cornfield's boundary, stunned by the taste of fruit in my mouth. Serpents whisper when pants, a peeled casing, sprawl behind the door latch, smelling of shit and piss, the rind at my feet. Scaled eyes record each naked morsel in a rush of blood, like God, shadowed by the darkness breathing beneath me. Repenting to the field, I fathom the firmness of corn, hardened by its proximity to the acres of snakeskins sloughed off, discarded. Do I put on corn husks or let light scald me into the sun? The grief of the return. Far away, I hear the wind pressing nearer. The corners of the house begin to buckle in, ashamed. I climb inside the dusky words of a book unclaimed, for all the dim years past, becoming clearer. On those dark pages, no one writes what is missing, and I cannot wait for this grief to make sense. The beaten child hunches over, tangled in the fence. At length, his shadow distended by dark waters, fishing. The windows have eyes facing ever inward, staring down shadows at all those dark places. Panes shudder, rattling in their frame cages at the lost things. A boy I unearth from Pinewood. Unlidded, my eyes clamped shut, against murky depths laid open. His stare long saddened by rejection. The death I gave him, refusing the question. whose guilt I now bear like an old hermit unkempt. Underneath, floorboards groan, creak with the great weight I gather around my body. A storm approaches, raging along the horizon, tossing seagulls inland, waging unwieldy fielded currents, worms strung on hooks like bait. The boy brings bruises back into the house, deep wounds surfaced by winds and new rain. He climbs into my lap and holds me quietly for long moments, like a clap of thunder, rumbling up from darkened and muddy ground. The light switches refuse to stay turned down. They throw light all over the house, pressing darkness down into the cellar like an uneasy calmness, numbing our bodies to sleep or else be found. Knowing what we have become, the wizened hermit and the boy undone by a life lost in stasis, the way we allow shame to create the basis for this storm to rise, lifting the shadow into respite. And this last one, worms in the summer grass. It isn't that far into June when the heat stings soft spring away and my family migrates to the sticky lake to cool ourselves beneath the shade of a beach umbrella. Rusted fish hooks and burnt grills surround the lake like ants around a rotting tree. The sky floats across the water as I rub my hands on wet grass, dripping sweat and bugs. Silence unnerves me. He brings us here, like a family, affixed, but the worms and I know differently. He rocks on waterlogged sneakers near the lake weeds, where mosquitoes hover and snails are born. I concentrate on threading a dying worm and imagine it's him. The ground around makes a sucking sound, like a dry drain. I sip from an empty can, praying he slips into the water. He sits away from us, over where the boy from Rochester Farm choked and died a few years back. I never knew that boy. At some point, his presence wakes me. He hovers over the bed. I notice my sheets peeled back toward the wall. Encumbered by his weight, I await the end, clenching my eyes as his hand holds on to the mattress. My line jerks, and I reel in a throwback. I wait until nightfall, when we will travel back to the house, and I will scrub ground worms from beneath my fingernails, and he will come into the bathroom to pee with me. The worm burdened around a rusted hook. Thank you.
As a fellow male survivor, I am feeling a lot of things right now. This may seem like an oddball question, but going further back into the work you read, you talk about a call to the police. Would you be willing to elucidate that a little bit? When that happened and how that happened?
Yeah, there was a lot of crazy going on, as you can imagine, in my childhood. The big trauma happened when I was 6, but I mean, I moved 50 times before I turned 18, and along the way, my mom was raising 3 kids. We were all, a year apart, and she was working all these jobs. She had a boyfriend, and she was dating a guy who was violent toward her. We came home and the house was torn apart. And when I called the police, I thought, well, I don't know what happened. let me call the police. Hi, my house is destroyed and nobody's here. I don't know what happened. They asked who's my parent, and I told them, and they said, hold on, she's waiting to talk to you. Like they knew that it's like they were expecting my call. So yeah.
Do you feel at all that the police kind of abdicated responsibility earlier, well, clearly knowing something was going on until you called?
I mean, they weren't there. I don't know how things happen. I knew more. I was more involved during the year and a half, 2 years that it took to put my abuser in prison.
How did that feel to put your abuser in prison?
Well, good in a sense, but really awful because my voice was removed from the equation. And it was done so because the adults completely botched what their job was to do. They decided that I couldn't handle it. I was this 6-year-old boy. I was in judges' chambers. I just told everything that happened in very specific and great detail. They knew that it happened. Hopefully they took notes, but they brought the abuser in to test me to see if I could handle it, and did not well prepare me. So I went into a freeze response. They didn't recognize that. They didn't offer to help. They didn't explain further. They didn't clarify. They didn't support. They just said, well, he can't handle it. And I became a line item in the notes of the case. My sibling testified, which is what put him behind bars, but it should have been for longer.
Yeah, it's sadly that happens over and over again. People should have gone. This is my personal opinion, and I'm not saying it's supported by any kind of psychological background or criminal background knowledge. But from the stats that I've seen, both my personal experience and the stats that I've seen, there is a stat that says abusers, predators have 50 to 100 victims during their lifetime. And that will keep going on until this justice system realizes that there's no other thing they can do right now than put that person away so they can't hurt anybody else. And they get 2 weeks, 3 weeks, 5 weeks, I'm sorry, 10 years. Well, 10 years later, they're going to come out and they're going to do it again. And I believe in the rights of the accused. I very deeply believe in the rights of the accused, but this is different. This whole dynamic is different. This kind of crime is different. And if they get back out, they're going to do it again, and somebody else will be hurt. I will say that you were incredibly courageous to tell your story, and I am personally angry that they removed your voice from that equation.